Welcome everyone to today's Explainer. We've got an absolute masterclass lined up for you. We're unpacking a concept that is literally the bedrock of modern economics. Today, we're focusing on the significance of index numbers. We're going to show you exactly why macroeconomists and policymakers will be completely, utterly lost without these statistical tools. So let's just dive right in.
Okay, let's put ourselves in the shoes of an everyday citizen for a second. You look at this massive, complex economy. We're talking millions of products, thousands of industries, prices constantly shifting up and down. It is totally natural to ask, are policymakers just flying blind? Like, how on earth do governments track all this stuff without the whole thing descending into absolute chaos? It kind of feels like they must just be guessing, right? Well, they aren't. They rely on one very specific statistical tool that essentially saves the day. Without it, macroeconomic analysis is literally impossible. That tool, the index number. It takes millions of chaotic, noisy data points and distills them into a crystal clear, actionable signal.
So here is the syllabus for our analytical masterclass today. We're breaking down the 4 absolute superpowers these numbers provide. 1. Framing suitable policies. 2. Studying trends and tendencies. 3. The measurement of inflation. And 4. Presenting data in real terms.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Framing Suitable Economic Policies.
Now, before we get too deep into the policy weeds, we gotta rapidly define our core concept here. What exactly is an index number? Well, at its core, it's a statistical device to measure net changes in an economic variable over a period of time. So the absolutely crucial point to remember is that index numbers aren't directly measuring physical quantities, like they aren't weighing pounds or gallons at a vacuum. Instead, they represent relative changes. You pick a base year, let's say you give it a starting value of 100, and then you just compare your current year to that baseline. Because honestly, without this baseline relative measurement, economic planning is a total non-starter. And this baseline builds directly into essential government master plans. Governments rely entirely, and I mean entirely, on these numbers to set data-driven guidelines across some massive sectors. We are talking about agricultural policy, industrial policy, the fixation of wages, and really importantly, dearness allowances, or DA. Just imagine trying to set agricultural policy for an entire nation without knowing if farm input prices are rising or falling compared to crop yields. You'd just be throwing darts at a board. Index numbers provide the map. A perfect, super relatable example of this in the real world is the dearness allowance. For workers in the organized sector, the government actually analyzes a specific price index to calculate and adjust the DA. It's a built-in legal provision designed to ensure that your wages actually keep pace with the rising cost of living. If that dearness index spikes, boom, the DA adjusts upward. It's a direct mathematical policy response to economic reality. Moving right along to Section 2, studying trends and tendencies. Think of a country kind of like a giant business that's tracking its future production path based on a steady baseline. So in 2011, you establish your base year. That's your anchor point. Then in 2012, you measure output relative to that anchor. By 2013, you're tracking imports. In 2014, you monitor exports. And by 2015, you've built up this cohesive timeline to analyze the current trend. You see, you aren't just looking at isolated, random data points anymore. You're looking at a multi-year story spanning 5 to 10 years. The outcome of all this tracking becomes incredibly clear. When tracking data across year 1, 3, and 5, you can instantly spot upward or downward tendencies in something like industrial production. And studying these tendencies, that's exactly how forecasters make their predictions. If the index of industrial production shows a steady upward tendency over the last 5 years, governments and businesses can confidently invest, build new infrastructure, and hire more workers. It is essentially the ultimate crystal ball, but one that's rooted in hard math. Which brings us to Section 3, the measurement of inflation. You can really think of index numbers as an economic thermometer. They act as barometers to regularly measure the heating up of price levels in the economy. It's a pretty perfect analogy when you think about it. If the economy gets too hot, our purchasing power just melts away. So by reading this thermometer, the government can step in and take timely anti-inflationary legal and financial actions, like, say, tweaking interest rates, before the fever gets totally out of control. But, an economy doesn't just have one single overall temperature. Policymakers actually use multiple distinct thermometers to track different sectors. For instance, you have the Consumer Price Index, which tracks what everyday people like us pay at the grocery store. But then you also have the Wholesale Price Index, which tracks prices at the factory gate.
Plus, you've got indices for agricultural production, exports, imports. The point is, each index number gives a highly specific temperature reading for a completely different room in the economic house.
And finally, let's hit section 4, presenting data in real terms. This is where things get really personal. We often see a massive disconnect between a nominal salary hike, which honestly can be a total illusion, and real income, which is the hard truth. Let's break this down. Imagine you get a massive 50% raise at work. On paper, nominally, you are absolutely thrilled. But what if the consumer price index shows that the cost of housing, food, and energy has literally doubled in that exact same period? Well, then your nominal salary hike is a complete illusion. You actually have way less purchasing power than you did before. Your nominal income went up, sure, but your real income went down.
So how do economists fix this illusion? They use a technique called the deflating process. It's basically a 3-step fix. Step 1, you take the original nominal financial data, that illusionary salary number we just talked about. Step 2, you use index numbers to adjust for those price changes. In this case, the index number acts as a deflator. It systematically strips away all the distorting effects of those price hikes. And finally, step 3, reveal the data in real terms at constant prices. Deflating essentially brings you back to base year truths. It clears away the fog of inflation, so you can see if the economy or your own wallet is actually growing or if it's just inflating. So we've seen how index numbers frame our policies, track our trends, measure the economic temperature, and strip away the illusions of nominal data. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question for you to ponder. After stripping away the illusion of inflation using these incredibly powerful index numbers, what is the true, real value of your current wages? It is the invisible math governing your own wallet. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning the data, and we'll see you next time.